This is Sunday Skate with Scott McLaughlin, Andrew Razor Raycroft, and Bridgette Proulx on WEEI.
Welcome into Sunday Skate. I'm Scott McLaughlin with Andrew Razor Raycroft and Bridgette Proulx. A jet-lagged Jacob Lassner behind the glass. He's telling us how he just got back from West Coast spring break. So,
to be young. To be young.
But, guys.
Feels like 4 in the morning, Scott.
Yeah, add in daylight savings.
What day
Please
is
don't
it?
complain.
What day
Please
is
don't
it?
complain. Feels like 4 a.m. and I didn't get to go to the West Coast, buddy boy, for spring break.
Come back with a tan.
Get up and get kids to a hockey rink already today.
Also, didn't get to go to the West Coast is Brad Marchand. He got sent to Florida. Lot to break down this week, guys. Obviously, the Bruins
What are you talking about?
pretty
Nothing.
much blew
There's
it up on
nothing.
Friday.
Yeah,
Pretty much blew it up. Brad Marchand out. Brandon Carlo out. Charlie Coyle out. Justin Brazeau and Trent Frederick out.
Mark
Lots
McLaughlin.
of Mark McLaughlin out. Tough blow for Bill Ricca. I saw Bill Ricca also had a rough night at the Celtics game last night because they did a thing on the Jumbotron where Celtics players were trying to pronounce towns in Massachusetts, and they all got Bill Ricca wrong. Just bad day. We're under attack. But anyways, that's not why we're here. So, guys, we got to start with Marchand. We're going to get into Saturday's game, which, after all that, one of the better efforts we've seen from the Bruins in a while, in a 4-0 win over Tampa, who had been the hottest team in the NHL coming in, had not been shut out in Tampa all season. So we will touch on that. We're definitely going to get to the new guys, but we have to start with Marchand because we knew there was going to be some follow-ups here of what exactly happened. How did this break down to the point where they actually ended up trading Brad Marchand and traded him to the Florida Panthers, like your biggest rival the last couple of years, the team that ended your last 2 seasons? And we got some insight on this from a couple of reports yesterday. First from ESPN's Emily Kaplan, who was the first I saw to report that the Bruins did actually make an offer of 3 years at some point. All along we had heard term was the sticking point. Bruins wanted shorter term, Marchand wanted longer. She reports that there was actually a 3-year offer on the table. Well, then we get some information from Elliot Friedman on Hockey Night in Canada last night about why that maybe still wasn't enough. So I just want to start here with his report in full, and then we can react to it. We can get to the phones, 617-779-7937. Call, text, but let's hear Friedman's report here.
Just a few more things I wanted to go over from the Marchand situation. Number one, I think the Bruins and the player had agreed on term, 3 years. But as Don Sweeney said yesterday, there was a gap, and there was a gap on AAV. And I don't think he was being asked to take a pay cut or anything like that, but I do think it was a sizable gap that they obviously could not bridge. Where I think this really went sideways was there was a point this week where Brad Marchand, who was currently injured and not in the lineup, asked for a face-to-face meeting with Bruins management. I don't know exactly when it was. I don't know exactly who was there, but it did happen. And in that meeting, Brad Marchand asked for a compromise. He said, I will compromise. I will bend on some of my ask. I'm asking the Bruins to bend on some of their stance, and we'll find a way to get this deal done because he wanted to stay as a Bruin. And it just didn't happen. The Bruins had gone as far as they were willing to go. And look, anybody out here watching hockey in the hockey world has watched Brad Marchand play. We know he's going to the Hall of Fame for one major reason. He's got an incredible amount of pride, and he puts everything on the line. I think he was really stung by that, and then all of a sudden the Bruins started to look, okay, we're not going to go any farther. We're going to start looking out there. And I think one of the things that really happened in the last 24 to 48 hours before the deadline was that Marchand's agent, I was told by several teams, Wade Arnott, made it very clear that Marchand had a place he wanted to go. And obviously that was Florida. And in the last minutes, the Bruins acquiesced and made the deal. But so that's everything I understand there. And I think it really hurt Marchand that the face-to-face meeting couldn't get a deal done.
A lot there. There's a whole lot there.
So that ends up with the trade.
2-hour show there.
That ends up with the trade where the Bruins get a conditional second-round pick in return for Brad Marchand. It can turn into a first if the Panthers win 2 rounds and Marchand plays at least,
which is a lot to ask.
50% of the games.
That is like I know that they're the reigning champs, but like to win 2 rounds in the Stanley Cup playoffs, even if you have a great team, you never know what you're going to run into.
Well, especially in a loaded division.
Yeah, that's a big question mark.
And it's 2028. Literally 3 years from now. Hopefully we're alive in 3 years.
Wow, Razor, that was morbid.
Well, no, it's I mean, the reality, like,
we could get wiped out by an asteroid at any point.
Well, yes, of
I'm
course.
planning on being here.
It wasn't even to be morbid. It's just to like imagine what the world's going to look like in 3 years from now. That's all. It's just it's not relevant, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and it's tough. It's already a tough sell to a lot of fans who obviously love Brad Marchand. But then you add in, like, you don't even get to now, look, they could trade the pick. It could be used on something else. But if you keep it, you don't even get to see the return of what you got for your captain. You don't even get to make the pick for 2 to 3 years. And then however long that player takes to develop.
The kid's 14, who they're going to draft right now. The kid is 14. Wherever he is in the world, he's 14 years old. So, yes, to your point, you're not going to see him for a really long time.
Could it be one of the Raycrofts?
No, he couldn't be. Oh, please. I don't want to be involved in that.
He's like, I hope not.
Yeah, exactly.
Trying to ship him out to Toronto or something.
No, be a doctor, dude. Don't do this.
All right, so this report. So, Bridgette, you're right. There are a lot of ways we can go on this, but let's start here. Like, because we had heard there's a gap, and I got to be honest, like, I'm okay with setting a limit on where you're willing to go with a 36-year-old player, even one as legendary as Brad Marchand. Now, what we don't know and what still makes this kind of hard to react to is, like, what were the actual numbers? Like, if I knew the actual numbers, I could give you, a clearer take on, like, would it have been worth it to extend for this? Because, Bridgette, when we were doing a skate podcast this past week, the number I threw out at you and Brian and said, like, this feels like kind of the point of demarcation to me where I really get cloudy was 3 years, $6 million a year. So if it was 3 years and less than that per year, I'm doing it. If it's 2 years, $6 million, I'm in. If the AAV is over $6 million, that's where I start to go, you know what? I love Brad Marchand, but I would be okay with making the deal. It really just ended up like a storm, like a perfect storm of bad things building into this, where Marchand is obviously loved. You end up trading him to the team that Bruins fans hate the most right now. And you didn't get enough in return because he's injured, and by Sweeney's own admission, that complicated trade talks. So, yeah, I get it. I get why fans are upset. I get why there had been some goodwill that Sweeney had built up in other trades where everyone was like, wow, that's a really good return. Good return for Coyle. Good return for Carlo. Got 2 picks in a prospect for Frederick. Got 3 assets for Justin Brazeau. Like, it's win after win after win. And then you see the Marchand one, and it's like, it almost feels like that ruined, like, all the other goodwill from this sell-off. And now you're getting these reports, and I think it's making Don Sweeney look kind of worse and worse in fans' eyes because, we don't know, like, what the breaking point was. And I think fans are like, you couldn't just extend to keep Brad Marchand?
There was so much going on, and I was working my other job, and I'm trying to prepare for my broadcast on Nesson, and I'm trying to keep my head straight and on straight, and I'm seeing all this stuff come in. Like, I'm driving and I'm getting phone calls from people like, oh, they traded Carlo now, and I'm trying to look at what they got in return, and it's like the room was spinning, and I was like, I don't even know what's happening, and I didn't even believe some of it because I was just too busy with the other stuff. I'm like, there's no way that's true. Carlo to Toronto, Marchand to Florida, this doesn't sound right.
And it all happened in an hour and a half.
Yes, the hour that I was driving to Lowell.
Oh no, the two big ones happened like within a couple minutes of each other too. The important one, because again, we talked last week. Coyle made sense. Coyle made a lot of sense. He was going to give you a lot of value. You didn't really want to deal with whatever he played like next year. Lindholm and Coyle have seemed to have overlapped in a lot of ways in how they play, and you're not even playing Coyle at center ice, which is what he is. He and really beneficial, and that's why Colorado got him. Great deal. Everything's going perfect for them, like perfect. And then it's Brad, and we'll get to Carlo, I know, in the next hour, but it really comes down to Brad. And of course, you can't run a team based on what the fan base's reaction will be to these deals. Unfortunately, for fan base to hear that's, you can't, because the fan base can't know all the ins and outs, right? Everyone can't know all, although we're finding out a lot about it.
Was it Bill Parcells, I think, who said, like, if you act like a fan, you'll end up a fan? Yes,
that's right. And that's not going to come from the organization, because that gets them in big trouble. But that's the reality. Like Don has to, Don's got a couple bosses, and he's also got to run a team and a cap and a roster and et cetera. So again, I heard a lot, and Brad was at the top of a lot of, not a lot, but I would say 3 teams that I know, maybe 4, and we're wondering, is he hurt? How hurt? What's et cetera? And I've taken those calls, and but at the end of all of those calls, he's going to be too expensive, anyways. We're not going to be able to give up what we think.
That's what we all thought.
That was that
this felt more like the Taylor Hall situation, where like.
Well, okay, so you hear this from Elliott today, and that or last night, and you're like, okay, that kind of ties into that, where if all of what Elliott says is true, he's pretty good at this. That means, okay, we're not signing you, but we will do you a solid at the end and send you where you want. Some of those teams that Brad had on his no movement were the ones that were really excited to get him, and he could block that. But I'm pretty sure 1 or 2 weren't on that list. So they ended up doing him a quote-unquote solid to send him to the team that he wanted to go, which, like Elliott says, was the Florida Panthers, in lieu of not giving him a 3-year deal that they felt was too much. And that is, if it was $12 million, of course you can't do that business, right? Like, we don't know what Brad's going to get this summer, or what kind of a deal he expected to get, or what was, where he's going to go, or what he's going to do in the summer. If it was 3 years, $12 million, you can't do it. If it was 3 years, $7 million, or 3 years, $8 million, 3 years, $8.5 million, then you might be more sentimental about it. But to your point, you might not. That might not look good in 2027, 28. Even if the cap is 113. So again, we got a clear picture from Elliott, I think, last night. Like, I think that he did a great job, kind of
he said, giving
all of us an idea of like where this kind of all came from, and how it came so late, and why it came so late, and why it was Florida. But we don't still know why the deal didn't get done. Yeah,
and he said the interesting thing that I thought he said, which I talked to you about before we got on the air, was that it wasn't a pay decrease. Like, they weren't lowballing him, was part of what Elliott was saying.
Correct. And I think that seems to have been said in a way to refute some of the other stories that were out there that claimed that the Bruins only offered a small amount of dollars.
Yeah, there had been reports that they'd only offered $3 million a year. Someone even at one point threw out like $2 million. And it's like, there's no way. Like, it might have been. Maybe there was a structure where like there's bonuses involved or something. But like that always seemed. I'm like, they're not coming in at $3 million a year. So
yeah, and again, so Elliott did. This is his job, and he worked that into the statement on purpose to make sure everybody knew that both sides were still dealing in somewhat of a fair way, not completely. Here's your 3-year, $1 million contract.
All right, off and running here on Sunday Skate. we are at a first break. I already see some calls. You can give us a call, 617-779-7937. Text us the same number, 617-779-7937. Jacob has you trending, and we will be right back after that.
Oh,
no. No. That did not just happen.
Oh, my God.
Are you kidding me right now?
Did that really just happen?
Hey, you're hot, you're hot.
That's crazy.
You gotta be kidding me.
That is
Oh, my God.
Oh, my God.
I want to know, Razor. That was on what?
It was, yeah.
That was Razor, Patrice Bergeron, and Tuukka Rask actually reacting to the goal that ended Thursday night's game, but that might as well have spoke for Bruins fans watching the trade deadline on Friday. I think there was a lot of that going on. All right, so we were talking Marchand, and we have a couple calls up, so let's get right to it. Let's start with Maria in Watertown. Good morning, Maria.
Good morning. I guess it's a good morning. I don't understand how ownership groups in this city of Boston work, letting franchise-altering players walk out the door for nothing. I understand negotiations can be difficult and precarious, but for me, I can't imagine that Brad Marchand was asking for break-the-bank money. And in my view, even if it was 6 or 7, they should have given it to him. Is Charlie McAvoy living up to his contract right now? In my mind, no. And he's making a hell of a lot more money than this guy is. I don't like the way this management group handles contract negotiations with players. This is not the first time that there has been some suspicious behavior on the part of Cam Neely and Don Sweeney, and now I'm going to throw Charlie Jacobs into that bucket as well. No matter which way you slice it and dice this was a deplorable return on this player. And good luck getting other proven NHL talent to come to your franchise now after the way that Brad Marchand left this organization.
All right. Thanks, Maria. So, yeah, Maria upset. Maybe a little bit of a different take here from Phil in New Hampshire. What's going on, Phil?
Hello, good morning. Yeah, I'm kind of on the opposite side of the spectrum. I think there's a very good chance Brad walks back through the door, but that's a different thing. I like the trade deadline. I think we got a lot of assets that I don't think we're capable of drafting. I think we're set up to have a really nice offseason. It's just a matter of, can we trust Sweeney to identify elite talent that'll work with our team and identify the proper coach to hire. I think he's great at hiring, but I think after he hires the guy, he builds teams that don't work with the guy's system anymore. So I really, really have high hopes for the season. And, God, I want Bergeron involved in this team somehow, because I think Bergeron is the key that unlocks Lindholm. I think Chara will help Zadorov. I think that next season is really hopeful, but I want Bergeron to walk through that door, and I sure would like Marchand back. That's it.
All right, thanks, Phil. So
what about Razor?
That's rational. That's a rational call, right? Like, because again, they did do what I think most people wanted to. I think they did what they needed to. They had to do when people were looking and evaluating and fine tooth combing this team is they needed to get younger, quicker, more talented, and start building the pipeline again. And they did all of that. It's just, of course, when the Hall of Famer gets dealt. And I'm assuming too. I think a lot of it has to do with what you got back for Brad too. I really do think if it had been this year's first round pick or a top prospect, or I think it would be, people wouldn't be quite as sentimental. Like, I think there is still a little bit of like, why a second? Like, I think that's still embedded in here. But rationally, take away the sentimental value to Brad, they did get what they would hope to do and what they needed to organizationally.
Yeah, and unfortunately the injury timing just really screwed all this up, because if Marchand's healthy right now, you definitely get more than that. Like, even if the list of teams where he wants to go is small, you can get more if he's walking in and playing day one. Because he's week to week, and Sweeney said they were, on the Bruins side, they were anticipating him to miss another 3 to 4 weeks. We'll see what Florida hasn't even gotten him in to evaluate yet, so we'll see what they end up thinking. Like, that does change it. That does make it more challenging to get, a quote-unquote fair return, because there's no guarantee that he plays before the end of the regular season. There's no guarantee he's 100%, even if he does. It sounds like it was a shoulder injury. I know people, originally speculated maybe concussion. Shoulder's a little, concussion is bad, but, you come back from that, and physically there's nothing holding you back once you're cleared to go. Shoulder, that might linger. So that complicates it. And then Marchand wanted to stay on the East Coast, which is something that Emily Kaplan touched on in her report during the ABC broadcast yesterday. Was that basically for family reasons he wanted to stay East. So that's where the people saying that Sweeney just played hardball and did Marchand dirty, it's not really. There was still at the end a give and take where they worked with him on destination, because Marchand only had an 8-team no trade list. 8. If there was a team not on the list that had a better offer, in theory, Sweeney could have just taken it, whether Marchand wanted to go there or not. He didn't. They did do him a solid in that respect. So it's not like they just completely turned their back on Marchand and screwed him over behind his back or anything. There was still some working together being done there.
He hasn't spoken yet, has he?
Marchand, no.
So I'd be really interested if this was a Zoom call to just hop on and I feel like there should be plenty of Boston media that want to be involved in this press conference when it does eventually happen with Florida, because who knows what their reporters are going to ask completely different things probably than what people up here would, because
they're 2 reporters.
They're 2 reporters, yes. That all 2 of them that we met the last 2 years in the playoffs, that when they came to Boston and Florida won. So, yeah, I think that also the fact that it is Florida is another big reason why it's emotional for some fans, because they still have the sting from Florida and what they've been able to do to Boston the last 2 years. And seeing them as the enemy, the team that you were trying to retool, rebuild, or whatever. What you were trying to do last offseason was get tougher, build a team that can beat Florida, and then you just traded your captain to that team that you were kind of trying to build yourself up to beat.
So another part of Maria's call I wanted to touch on is this idea of how they've handled veterans at the end. I guess I don't think this is as big of an issue as some fans clearly do. The other obvious one that I think is being referenced, Maria didn't name him, but Zdeno Chara they let go and allowed him to finish his career elsewhere. And the reports at that time were that basically what they did offer him a deal, but it came with no guarantees of everyday playing time. He might be in and out of the lineup type of thing. And Chara wanted, more certainty, so he went elsewhere. I guess I just don't have an issue with it. You can't, if you get too sentimental and just allow guys to finish out their careers on your team on their terms, you can end up in a tough spot. And I don't necessarily know that that's how this would have gone with Marchand if you give him 3 years, $6.5, $7 million a year, whatever it would have ended up being. Maybe he would have been really good that whole time. And you get to the end and you're like, oh, we didn't regret that at all. It turns out Marchand was still really good at 39 years old. But I don't have an issue with drawing a line in the sand and saying, yes, even with a legend, there's only so far we're going to go, and we know at some point we have to turn over this leaf. We have to turn the page and maybe getting out ahead of that. Like, I don't. Now, you wish you had gotten more in return. Absolutely. We went through why that was complicated. But the idea in general that, like, you have to try to let these guys finish their careers here if they want to, it is a business, and I just don't think that's how you operate on a business level.
No, and like, Big Z's back. He's in the mix. He's around. He still loves the Bruins and will go in the Hall of Fame as a Bruin. Like, guys get over it is what I'm saying. Like, they do. We all do get over it. I'm sure you're not happy at the time, and you're more than there's lots of words that get said, but over a few years you get over it and realize it's a business. The one side of this, and I don't know if we'll get to this probably in the summer, but he's clipping 3/4 of a point per game, and he had 3 surgeries this year. Like, he played on and was part in a lesser role, but still very big part of a Team Canada, which is incredibly hard to make. I can't, like, you have to be. You're one of the top 20 players in the world to get on that team. Like, it's a big deal. He's going to be on the Olympic team next year. So when you talk about a guy, like, how are you filling his production on the ice? Like, where is that coming from? That's the other part of this that doesn't really matter right now, and it's going to probably come more in the summer. But that's the other question: is what's the plan for your left wing now that he's not there? Because again, he's your second most productive offensive player, and it's not even close on this team, in his ability to still create at times on his own and make other teams' players better. And again, this is coming off of 3 surgeries in the summer where he had such a slow start, but he was starting to get going until this last injury here. And the hockey part of it, to your point of Zdeno, wasn't the same as this, and that's where you go to, what are you doing to fill that spot on the left wing? You just lost Jake DeBrusk. We saw how the winging, they need a lot of wingers. They need a lot of wingers going forward.
Yeah, the question is, there's 2, I think, 2 big ones. What's the plan for the second line? Because your second line, as of yesterday against Tampa Bay, was Koepke, Mittelstadt, Lettieri. So that's clearly not the second line of the future.
Hey, they cooked yesterday.
They did but cook. I don't know if Cole Koepke and Vinny Lettieri, who's played a majority of the season in Providence, are the ideal partners on the second line there. So what's the plan for the second line? Because you're trying to build out a legitimate top 6 forward group that can compete if you're trying to get right back to it. And how are you filling the leadership void? Because Marchand, Coyle, and Carlo were all voices in the room. And I know some people probably don't see it, but as 3 of us are in the room sometimes after the games, and we hear the way that these guys speak and we see them interact with other players, Coyle and Carlo didn't wear letters. They weren't given letters for this team until recently because the injuries. But that's leadership that has left as well. And Marchand, the obvious one. So, like, is the leadership going to be something that grows from within? Maybe. But it also feels like there might be a need to bring in some sort of veteran to help supplement some of the leadership, because, sure, Pasternak could do it somewhat, but he's still going to have to grow into that too. So that's another big question to me.
And just, again, like, I've got the free agent list for next season up right now, and it just stood out to me, because I hadn't thought about it, but Brock Nelson, Sam Bennett, Kyle Palmieri, Nikolai Ehlers, Mitch Marner all have the same or less goals than Brad Marchand does this year, which probably, if you name those names, you wouldn't expect Brad to be in that mix with the way his slow start was, but he's still very effective out there.
There's no question. You have a lot of holes to fill on and off the ice.
Yeah.
Like, that is absolutely part of this. And when, we'll probably play the cut coming up. I don't want to play it right now, but Don Sweeney said, like, we didn't burn it down and they want to be in a competitive mindset very next year. And it's like, Okay, but there's a lot of work to do to do that, like to accomplish that. You're right. Like this team was already at least one bona fide top 6 forward short. At least one, maybe 2. Now you're definitely at least 2, maybe 3 short.
Yeah.
So like that's a lot. If you think you're going to be back at it next year, it is hard to add that in the offseason. Because even if you have the money to spend, and by the way, $29 million in cap space, we saw this past year, like that dwindles quickly. That ends up not being, that doesn't mean like, oh, we're going to go sign 3 $9 million players. No, like you got to fill out the rest of the roster. You got guys making $1 million down at the bottom. Like it adds up. You have your own guys. Morgan Geekie needs a new contract.
It's like going to Target.
Mason Lohrei needs a new contract. Yeah.
It adds up real quick.
Right. So like you're maybe in free agency, you're maybe talking about either like one guy at the very top of the market or 2 from the second tier. Like you're not. So then what are you doing? Are you using some of these assets to make a trade? Like there's just a ton of work to do if they really want this to be a short-term retool, which is how Sweeney sold it on Friday evening when he met with the media after the deadline. I personally have a lot of skepticism about whether it's going to be a 1-year turnaround. I think that's wishful thinking. To me, and honestly, I'm not sure I would even try to force it in 1 year because that's how you end up throwing money around and signing contracts that you regret. Like you can't have another offseason like this past one where you spend all this money on Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov and they don't fit and they don't do what you were hoping they did. Now, maybe those guys are going to be better going forward. They have to be. The Bruins absolutely need them to be. And I think Zadorov has actually played a little better recently, so I'll give him some credit there. But, yeah, like, you go out and you spend that kind of money again, just willy-nilly on July 1st. What if you end up with 2 more bad contracts? And, like, now you got 4 of them on your books. Like, it can go sideways really quickly if you just, like, throw money at the wrong places here.
No question, and it's really well said. And then just to add another wrinkle to that, every other team has $30, $40, $50 million to spend too. So you're just not going to
cap went up for everyone.
Yeah, that's right. You can't outbid everybody. Like it's just not. That's just it's wishful thinking, as you said. So no, and again, that's part of this piece for me of the Brad Marchand piece. Beyond the sentimental and everything else, is that he provides a great service in your lineup and is a great bridge. Yes, he might not be 100-point, 102-point guy anymore, but he's still able to make players better that he plays with and has a way of driving your lineup even as a left winger still. So that's the it's going to be difficult to find left wingers to do that same thing.
All right, we do have to get another break here. We have some phone calls to get to. We'll do that after the break. If you want to jump in, 617-779-7937. We will be back with more Sunday Skate. All right, welcome back to Sunday Skate. I'm Scott McLaughlin with Andrew Raycroft and Bridgette Proulx. Let's get right to the phones here, and let's start with Sean and Lowell. Sean, what's up?
Steve, Bridgette, Razor, how's it going this morning?
Scott,
Steve.
But that's okay.
Oh, yeah, Scott, whatever.
I'm calling you Steve
Works
from
out.
now on.
It's actually not the first time I've gotten mixed up these last few days. Well, I'll get to that. All right. What's on your mind, though?
Yeah, I just wanted to call and talk about this Bruins culture that everyone's so mad about with Marchand leaving and so forth. I'm probably one of the few people who isn't heartbroken over Marchand leaving. Great player, great soldier for the last 15 years. But my biggest thought about the whole Bruins culture thing is, what culture are we talking about? The one that's consistently choked in the playoffs? The one that hasn't really won the cup besides 2011 when we had Tim Thomas on top of his head? Like, yeah, that's a great culture, right? Not really. Not in my opinion. Chara was here for 20 years and he won 1 cup, and whenever those guys talk about, they don't talk about, not winning the ones that they should have won, and et cetera. But I think also with the new captaincy vacancy, I think it's a good thing. I kind of compare it to the Marcus Smart, Jason Tatum, and Jaylen Brown thing when I think Scott, I think you said it yesterday on the skate pod the other day, is it's like big brother around, right? So I feel like as soon as Smart left, those two guys were able to flourish in their leadership roles. And I think, Pasternak has shown a lot this year. I think, last year, if you asked me, a couple years ago, I probably would have said McAvoy is the next captain. But I think this past year, Pasta has shown a lot. And I think those two guys are going to flourish in the new role at some point, either this year or next year with whoever the new head coach is. And, I think if you bring in another veteran like Brock Lesnar or not Brock, but Brock, and then a couple of those guys, and maybe give those guys the A and they can watch from that position. But I think that's just my thoughts on the whole so-called Bruins culture thing.
All right. Thanks, Sean. So, yeah, I mean, look, you definitely hear some of this that, what are you really clinging to? Well, it's a culture of being competitive every year, of being in it and having a chance. And, yeah, we all acknowledge this era of Bruins hockey, you feel like they should have won more. Like, they left at least one, maybe two on the table. Absolutely, that's disappointing. There are a lot of worse ways these last 15 years could have gone. You could have the Buffalo Sabres culture or the Ottawa Senators culture. Like, you could have a culture where you're just never in it and there's no leadership and no one knows how to bring a team together, get a team to be in the playoffs just about every year. So I would just say, be careful what you wish for. So, yes, you can be disappointed that there wasn't a second or even third cup at some point during this run. Obviously, they were right there on the doorstep in 2019. The 2023 team sets all kinds of records and then loses in the first round. Like, I get it. It's very frustrating. But you had those chances year after year. You were in it. There was a stretch of, I think, 5 years in a row where they at least got out of the first round. There's not a lot of teams you can say that about. So, if you want to say, okay, you weren't the Blackhawks dynasty or the Lightning winning back-to-back cups or the LA Kings winning two, but even, those teams, they all had to go down at some point. Chicago's been stuck near the bottom of the league now for 7 years. So, yeah, there's a flip side to this coin that's really ugly that has you longing for, the Bergeron Chara days.
That's right. And listen, culture changes, right? It's not the same league as it was in 2011. It's not even close. So the way you lead, the way you have culture, it changes over time, but it's important. It's vitally important in all of pro sports, but especially hockey. It is, and it doesn't magically appear. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of responsibility. It takes a lot of dedication for the players to build that themselves. And, of course, there's ways to do it a little bit differently than what it has been done in the past here. But please, you shouldn't be flippant about it. And like you just said, and the way you put it is you shouldn't be, as a fan, say, I don't think it really matters. They never really want, no, you need to be careful in that respect. And the team and the people around it need to be ultra laser focused on finding a way to continue that.
Yeah, and look, maybe part of the issue this season is that it did slip a bit. We saw this team be unable to respond in situations where normally we see them respond. Maybe they just didn't have enough talent, but maybe some of that drive slipped somewhere along the way where this team couldn't string the 60-minute performances together. When they lost 2 in a row, there were times this year they let it pile up to 3, 4, 5. Even they had a 6-game losing streak in there. That was different. That was something different than in the past. And, where Sean is right is, that Celtics comparison, I don't know if it's apples to apples, but yeah, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown kind of had to be pushed into a bigger role and pushed into leadership. And that is going to happen here with David Pastrnak and Charlie McAvoy. whether they're 100% ready or not, whether they wanted that now or not, like, that's what's happening very clearly. Like, there's no one else to turn to.
Yeah, and what happened to Jim Montgomery, right? Like, I know this was a while ago, but, like, the Bruins were not able to, earlier in the season, stop those losses from piling up and stop the bleeding at different times. And then, that gets Montgomery fired.
Even within
because
games, like, how many games did they just let get completely away from them?
Yeah, and Montgomery gets fired because it's looked at as, the coach should be able to get some sort of message through and get back on track. And then after the coaching change, they did start playing better, but then they went right back to it recently. And obviously the injuries are a big factor too. Like you lose Lindholm, you lose McAvoy, so that's very recently the McAvoy one, but that doesn't help either. But it's been going on for the whole season. But you're not trying to like put that on Marchand, are you? Like I didn't see him as the issue in any way.
No, I'm not putting it on Marchand at all, but it does maybe lend itself to the idea that like a season like this, maybe this isn't the worst time to turn the page and usher in that next era where it is now on Pastrnak and McAvoy. And I would also agree with Sean, our last caller, on I do think we've seen Pastrnak take a step up in terms of maturity and leadership. Like, I've been impressed with him throughout this season. Now, we really only get to see what he gives us when he talks to the media, right? Like, we're not in there during intermissions or before games or on as they're getting ready for practice. But, the things you've heard from Pastrnak, and I think we'll play some of what he said after the game last night. In fact, we'll probably come back from the break with it because we do have to get to a break here. But I've liked what we've seen from Pastrnak on the ice, but also some of the things like we've been hearing from him. So we got to get to a break here, but hour 2 of Sunday Skate coming up. You can call in 617-779-7937. We'll be right back.
Don Sweeney said he had an opportunity to give you a call, and without giving away any of the details, what was the message that you wanted to get across from that phone call?
Well, obviously it was just a quick phone call yesterday. I like I said, both everybody had so much stuff going on, and I'm pretty sure, he's in Boston, so I'm pretty sure he's going to address the group, and like I said, we are here to fight till the end. We are not going to go away. We're going to keep battling until the last game and then see where it takes us.
Welcome back to Sunday Skate. That was David Pastrnak talking after the Bruins 4-0 win over the red-hot Tampa Bay Lightning Saturday afternoon. Bruins go into that game having lost 8 of 9, having just traded away 3 core players in Marchand, Coyle, and Carlo. Lightning had won 10 of 11, hottest team in the NHL. And the Bruins shut them out on home ice. The first time all season anyone had done that to Tampa. So Pastrnak, right that they fought yesterday. They came out ready to go yesterday for sure. We'll see what it leads to, right? Like, this is obviously now a new look team, a team that on paper you look at and think, well, that team's, if they're going in any direction, they're going further down the standings, higher in the draft order.
Honestly, you look at it and it's like the lineup from yesterday. You look at it and you go, okay, they're going to get a really high draft pick this year, the way that this is built out, the rest of the season. Meanwhile, they're only, 3 points out of a wild card spot?
2. Technically 2. Now, they've played like 3 more games than everyone still, which is kind of crazy this late in the season.
But like it's crazy that it could still go either way. It's like, okay, well, they could actually legitimately make the playoffs somehow, some way. Like if they're able to pull it together for just somehow. Or this team could absolutely just fall out. And it looks like there's a lot of Providence Bruins on this roster right now. So it's I feel like that's the direction it's going. They could end up drafting pretty high if the roster plays like the way that it's built, or the potential is
the way you would
lower.
expect. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. You're gonna be. You're certainly. You haven't been this high since Charlie McAvoy, right? That's the last time you were top 15. They'll be top 15.
Yeah.
probably you're not going to be. I don't see a way you're going to be top 7 or 8. You might if the balls bounce the right way, get into the top 10, but it's at the backside of the 10.
Going into yesterday, they were 9th worst in points percentage.
Yeah.
So now they're back outside the top 10, but like they were already right there. So
yeah, so you get right around that number 10, which again that'll produce. It's not a good draft, of course. If anyone's paid attention to that, it isn't a good draft. But that being said, you're going to land on an NHL or a 10. Might not be a superstar, but there's lots out there, and they get to sharpen their pencils now too. That's the beauty for the draft guys is they haven't been able to be impactful, and people that say they haven't drafted well, it's not really hitting the mark for me. They haven't. They've hit on like that. Beecher and Frederick are hits. If you want to look at the numbers and the stats of like 30th overall, they are hits. And I know not everyone wants to hear that. Everyone wants to talk about the one guy that they didn't pick at 30th that got picked at 42. That, oh my God, how did they? But the whole league missed him twice at 42. So please, it's hard to do. So these guys get an opportunity to go to work, and they do have to get something at 10 that will change. Will move this team going forward.
Do you think Don Sweeney will get the chance to do this? Do you think he's here at that point in time?
Yeah,
so he's
draft day?
Through,
yes. 1,000,000%. You saw the statements yesterday. You don't get to do what you did this week and not have the confidence in June.
If it had been a quieter deadline, I'd maybe think, I wonder if that might be on the table. Maybe they're saving the big retool, the big moves for the offseason if you have a new GM coming in. But Razor's right. Like you can't, if you're ownership, like you don't let a lame duck GM have the day that Don Sweeney had on Friday.
You don't get to trade Brad Marchand.
Yeah.
Just simple as that. You don't get to do that if you're going out if you don't think that guy has the vision for your team or you're giving him you're again, I'm not like this has nothing to do with this team. So I like don't cut this or take it out of context. But you would never
do that.
Yeah,
here.
exactly. Like I know I'm going to end up on some show tomorrow, and it's like, oh, Raycroft said like it. But so I'm prefacing this in a big way. You would fire Sweeney before trading Brad Marchand to make sure that the team did it. And that's how that would work if it was actually going to happen.
So the reason I asked the question is because, like both of you, I've gotten texts over the last few days since Marchand got traded. I've gotten so many texts about, definitely do not let Sweeney draft like with these picks. I'm done with Sweeney. I'm done. Like I got a lot of texts saying I'm done watching the Bruins. But certainly the consensus is.
My mom called me on Friday and told me she was done watching the Bruins.
It's so good. I love the passion. I love it.
So like
good.
People.
My kids are like beside themselves.
Are they?
Yeah.
Were they like big Marshy fans?
Oh yeah, my little guy. He wants a Panthers Marshy jersey for his birthday.
Oh my
next
goodness!
Month.
Are you gonna get him one?
I don't know yet. I think
Does he listen to the show?
Can't be giving away.
Yeah, birthday secret. He's probably listening right now. He's not at home watching YouTube right now. He's listening to us.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
To the old fashioned radio over here. But I do think it's something that I'm glad we're talking about, just because I think a lot of fans think he's gonna be gone. Like I think a lot of fans genuinely think this was the last thing he's doing, and then they're bringing someone else in to do the rest of it.
Well, I do wonder how long the leash is now. Like, so Razor referenced it, but Bruins put out statements from Charlie Jacobs, Cam Neely, and Don Sweeney on Saturday morning. And the most interesting one was the Charlie Jacobs statement, where he says very clearly, I have full confidence in Cam, Don, and the management team. He has said that before. He said it at the Bruins Gala. I'm saying Gala, Bridgette. I know
Gala.
We had a fight about this on our
Gala.
podcast.
It's definitely Gala.
It's Gala.
Thank you. Didn't Brian say it a third way? I don't know.
There was a Gala, yeah. He said it then, and that was only a few months ago, where he talked up Sweeney and his credentials and the job that he's done and sounded like someone who was very committed to him. But I do wonder how long the leash is. Like, is the expectation that this team is back on track and in a playoff spot next year? Like, is that the expectation, or does Sweeney have multiple years now to retool? Like, are they looking at this more like 2015, 2016, where it wound up being 2 years out of the playoffs? Then, 2017, you get in, with a late push and knocked out in the first round, but like now you're on the right path. Like, that's what I wanted, and that's what we don't know. It's just, what is the expectation for what this retool or rebuild or whatever you want to call it looks like going forward? Because, as I said, I have my doubts about whether this can happen in 1 year. I think it's going to have to be at least 2. But what is there? Have they been told, have they been sold that we can get back on track next year? And then if you don't, if next season you get off to a slow start and you're looking like you're not a playoff team again, like, is that it? So those are kind of the big questions that, like, right now we don't know the answer to. We probably won't get to talk to Charlie Jacobs until after the season when they do their end-of-year press conference. But, like, that's, I would love to know that. Like, that's sort of the $1 million question.
That's fun speculation for going forward, for sure.
Do you want to take another one of our calls?
Yeah, sure.
Let's get these guys off the call.
Let's skip ahead a couple. Let's go to David in Brockton because he has a take on management specifically. What's up, David?
I'll tell you, this is, I think, and I'm going to say this, Don Sweeney is the worst general manager in the National Hockey League. And I don't understand how you fired Peter Chiarelli because he mismanaged the cap, more or less. You're not going to keep this guy for maybe another 2-3 years so he can screw it up again? I would say thank you very much, Don Sweeney. You're gone. Cam, you're gone. I want to bring in somebody that knows how to find talent, not only in the pro scouting, but also in free agent, but also in the draft. Because currently I have no confidence in this management team at all. None. I have no confidence in ownership at all. None.
All right. Thanks, David. So I don't like coming across as a Sweeney defender because, like, in my heart, I don't really think I am. Like, I think he's made a lot of mistakes. I also think he's done – the reason I think I come across that way is because some of the takes on Sweeney, like that one, are so negative where it's like the worst GM in the NHL? Really? I mean, come on, guys. Like, have you looked around this league? Have you looked at how incompetently some of these teams are run? The reason the Bruins were in cap trouble the last couple of years is because they went all in 2023 on a team that had the greatest regular season in NHL history.
And one of the best NHL rosters that you'll see.
But like now we're supposed to act like that was some big mistake that should get him fired because it messed up the cap for the next couple of years?
No, that I'll take it because obviously I believe wholeheartedly. Like, it's the same thing as the culture question. It's like, culture doesn't matter and Don Sweeney sucks. It's like, well, there can be some middle ground on all of this. And the reality is, Don, no one works harder in the league than Don. Nobody, the same with the drafting. Like, they have these pieces that they have that we just talked about that are untradeable are draft picks of the Boston Bruins. David, Charlie, Jeremy Swayman, like, most teams don't have. Florida Panthers don't have their own draft picks. They have everybody else's first-round draft pick. Like, they've done a decent job drafting on top of it as well. And I will have debates with people on that. Don't go back to 2015 either. That does not count. But so to your point, you're right. He's not he just won Team Canada GM 4 Nations. Like, he was that guy. You don't get that job.
How hard would that have been to do, though?
You don't get that job. How hard is it to get that job?
Oh, to get the job, yes. I thought you meant to win with Team
extremely
Canada.
It's extremely hard to get that job, and you have to make hard decisions to leave guys off of the lineup.
Yeah,
that's
decided. That's decided by Hockey Canada and his peers.
That's right.
There's no lottery where they just pick a name out of it.
Correct. And anybody, like, the idea that he, all we heard was, wow, I can't believe they fired Montgomery. Can't believe they fired Cassidy. They got picked up within 2 minutes of, well, Don Sweeney's getting picked up in 28 seconds because any organization would love to have that guy. So yeah, exactly. There's ways to criticize him, but to go all the way, full nuclear on it is, I will happily defend for you, and you can stay kind of a little bit more in the middle.
Yeah, because, look, like, there have been misses, and yes, everyone starts at 2015. The year they drafted Urho Vakanainen, there were better players who went after. Like, if you wanted to call that a miss, but by the way, they kept Vakanainen's value high enough that he was a chip in the Hampus Lindholm trade, so it's not like you got absolutely nothing there. And then Beecher and Frederick were late first. Would I have liked to have taken Alex DeBrincat over Trent Frederick? Sure, but you still got a productive NHLer. The Beecher draft stunk. Like, if you want to go back to that 2019 draft and look at the guys picked after, like, pick 12, that was just a straight-up bad draft. There just are not a lot of NHLers there.
Yeah.
Mason Lohrei was a second-round pick. Matt Poitras was a second-round pick. Like, those guys are breaking in and look like part of your future. Those are hits. In NHL terms, players who develop into NHL regulars in the second round, that's a hit. Like, whether they're stars, whether they're top of the lineup guys, like, very much remains to be seen for both of those guys. But as second round picks go, like, those were hits.
Yeah, it's not dire, right? Like, it's just like, it's not like dire.
Right. And the last summer, at least in year one, the Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov signings look like misses. Like, looks like there's other ways they should have spent that money because they haven't. On Lindholm especially, I think Zadorov has been, honestly, like, for the most of the season, not that far off what people should have thought they were getting. Like, I remember when they signed him, people could go back and find old podcasts. I was like, yeah, he's like a 4.5. Like, that's how I viewed him. And I was like, that doesn't mean it's a bad signing, but, like, let's be realistic about what he is. He's not a top pairing guy who should be playing 23 minutes. So if people thought that's what they were getting, then yes, I understand the disappointment. I just don't know why you were expecting that.
Lindholm missed 65 games this year, right? Like, and that's left side.
Right, that's your number one
up.
left shot guy.
That it would look different if you played those 65 more games. It just would for Zadorov, for Lohrei, and for the Bruins. It really affected where everybody got slotted. But that's what happened, and you're and. Everybody's got to pull forward, but it's possible.
Okay, we do have to catch a break here. I see more calls on the line. There's more to get to here. I do want to get to what the Bruins got in return too, because we saw some of these guys play their first game on Saturday. You can give us a call, 617-779-7937. Text us at the same number. Jacob has your trending, and then we'll be back. All right, welcome back to Sunday Skate. Scott McLaughlin here with Andrew Raycroft and Bridgette Proulx. Jacob behind the glass. Let's get right to George and Warwick on the phone lines. George has been holding for a long time. Thank you, George. What's on your mind?
Hey, thanks so much. Appreciate the show weekly. And, maybe a little bit different question here or concern. Looking forward, guys. In my lifetime, born in the late 50s, there's always been an iconic defenseman that this team could be built around, from Orr to Park to Z.
Bork.
Bork. This Charlie McAvoy, early on in his career, he looked like he could be the next in that line of legacy defensemen. The last year or so, not so sure. Don't know if that's too much to put on him, but do we have a core player, an anchor player at each level, the goaltender, the defenseman, and the front line, to look forward and build around?
Thanks, George. So I would say, yes, there's absolutely the potential that you have those three pieces. We see Pastrnak, after a slow start to the year, playing like one of the four best players in the world since the start of December, basically. Jeremy Swayman's having a down year. I do think we saw last year in the playoffs he can be a legit number one goalie. He's got to get back to that level now, and you hope that a full off season, a regular training camp without all the chaos of negotiations and sitting out and having to get his ice time in over at BU. Like, you hope that gets him into a much better place to start next season. On McAvoy, which is who he was asking about specifically, look, this is a guy who has had 2 top 5 finishes in Norris Trophy voting already in his career. And they were deserved. Those were not mistakes. Like, he was one of the 5 best defensemen in the NHL those years. Yeah, there has been a little bit of a step back, and there's been injuries, which has been, unfortunately, the big one. Specifically, a couple shoulder injuries, including the one he's dealing with right now, suffered at Four Nations. In Four Nations, you saw someone who rose up and looked like one of the best defensemen in the world, going head-to-head with Connor McDavid and knocking him down and stopping him. Like, so that is still in Charlie McAvoy. It is hard to bring that for 82 regular season games. I do think it's likely at this point that you're not going to see him be one of the top offensive defensemen. I don't think he has that ceiling. But can he be one of the best defensive defensemen who contributes 50 to 60 points? Because that is still extremely valuable. And that is still a number 1 defenseman that you can build around. Absolutely.
Yeah, and be physical. I mean, when he was playing in Four Nations, obviously the injury comes at such a hard time. But if he had managed to get through that tournament without that injury, it felt like he was going to come out of it and be playing at a really high level for the Bruins if he was able to not sustain that shoulder injury. So I was sitting there watching Four Nations, very encouraged by what I saw with him. And unfortunately, it turned out that, we don't know if we're even going to see him again this season. But yeah, he has it in him. The attributes that you're describing, Scott, with the defense and physicality, he definitely has that. But I understand the question too, though, because I think there have been times in the season where he's been kind of quiet, whereas you'd want to see it more consistently.
They're anchored extremely well at all 3 places with those guys. Nobody's career is linear. Nobody's career goes straight up. You have waves. You have months where it doesn't go your way. It's just the way the game is, the way the margins are in the NHL. And I think David's the one where he's a superstar. You can, whether he has a bad start or a bad December or a bad March, you can set your watch to 80 to 100 points and 35 to 55 goals. I mean, that's he's that good. He's different than the other 2 guys that we mentioned. The other 2 are still learning, and especially Jeremy. He's going to take so much out of this season. He's going to become better because of it. It was his first year being a starter. There's a huge difference. It's a different league when you're that guy rather than what he's been prior. And Charlie's only 27 too, and he's still learning every year. And he learned over Four Nations, and a really bad break to have an injury and have this go the way it has with the infection, etc. But there's still a lot of hope. I agree he's not going to be a Norris guy, because I think the Norris guy is going to have to be a 100-point guy at this point, with Makar and Quinn Hughes not going anywhere for the next 15 years. He's just not going to challenge that. But that doesn't mean you can't win championships with a guy like that on the back end if he's complemented in the right way.
And by the way, if McAvoy gets back to the level we all think and know he can, where, again, he's elite defensive defenseman and 50 to 60 points offensively, then the people who think he's not playing up to the $9.5 million contract, that goes away. Then he's a steal at that.
Well, and the 9.5 is just going to continue to be less of an issue
because
as this goes forward.
Legit number 1 defensemen are going to be getting 12 to 14 million in the next couple of years.
Yeah, starting this summer.
Yeah.
Like, we'll wait till Jacob Chikrin signs this year, and then you'll be like, oh, okay, that McAvoy deal looks real good.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned this earlier, Scott. Do you want to go through some of the returns, like what the Bruins actually got back for? As much as we've talked about the trade deadline, we spent a lot of it talking about the guys that left. rather than some of the stuff that came in. And obviously some of these guys are going to have impacts more immediately, and some of this is going to be long in the future, especially with some of these draft picks, 2027, the Marchand draft pick. So, did you want to go through it?
Sure.
I have it up, but if you'd like to,
I'll start with Brandon Carlo to Toronto for 2026 first-round pick, Fraser Minton, who is one of their top forward prospects, and a 2025 fourth-round pick. Charlie Coyle goes to Colorado, along with a fifth-round pick. You get Casey Mittelstadt, who we saw make his debut, Bruins debut Saturday. Will Zellers, an 18-year-old prospect who leads the USHL in goals right now and is heading to North Dakota next year. And a 2025 second-round pick. And then the smaller deals, Trent Frederick went to Edmonton, obviously, along with Max Jones. You got second-round pick, fourth-round pick, defense prospect Max Warner. Justin Brazeau goes to Minnesota. Bruins get Jacob Lauko back. Marat Husnudinov, who also made his Bruins debut Saturday.
Who Pasta tried to pronounce, but said, we'll figure it out eventually.
Yeah, where there seems to be some debate as to whether he's Cuzzy, not entirely sure on the nickname yet. They also got a sixth-round pick in that deal. And then they traded a fourth-round pick to Buffalo for Henry Jokiharju, whose game I want to get into, because that felt like almost a nothing deal. You're like, okay, whatever. Well, he had a pretty darn good debut Saturday, so I'm kind of more interested now to see where this goes. And then there was one more minor deal. I think Dale Arnold had the details on this.
I guess, is it Scott McLaughlin you said was Mark McLaughlin.
He's going to New Jersey.
Yeah, I got traded to New Jersey. No.
All right, it was fun,
Pack your
Scott.
bags.
Yeah.
Don't let the door hit you on the way out.
No, so, Billerica native Mark McLaughlin to New Jersey for...
It's easy to get you guys confused.
Young defenseman Daniil Misiul, who I'm not even going to pretend I know anything about, quite frankly. All right,
boy. Played one game this year.
Yeah. But, so the picks are the picks. They'll make them. We'll have time to talk about that in years to come. They might trade them. The players. Let's start with Casey Mittelstadt, because he comes in, he's got 2 years left on his contract, and it's a real contract, $5.75 million. Someone who had shown a lot of promise in Buffalo, had 59 points one year, 57 points last season in a season split between Buffalo and Colorado. Colorado traded for him with the idea that he was their second-line center behind Nathan MacKinnon. There were times last year where that looked like he was going to be. This season, he got off to a really good start and then kind of completely fell off and has been having a bit of a down year. 34 points, I think?
Yes.
Yeah, 11 and 23.
Yep. So was going to slide down to their third line when they went out and got Brock Nelson, but really that freed them up to move him for a third-line center that they fits better with what they want to do, which was obviously Charlie Coyle. So now the Bruins get Mittelstadt. I think the idea is they're going to see if he can be their second-line center. So what are they getting in Mittelstadt? He's 26, so it's not like he has a ton of development left, but I think there is still a ceiling there where he's certainly better than a 34-point guy that he's been so far this season.
He should be, and that's the expectation. He has, and yeah, that's 26. Still lots to learn in this league at that age. He's different than what they have. The obvious Lindholm-Coyle overlap in their play that was very evident this year. Very evident the last 3-4 months that. Again, moving Coyle to the wing, explain that essentially Lindholm at this point is, and he's very good at it. He's very good to 200-foot game, very good defensively, but doesn't have the offense to carry the line as a first or a second line. And that's what Mittelstadt has the opportunity to be. He's not going to be a shutdown center for this team. He's not in the mold of all the other centers that we talk about so much and the way the Bruins play defensively. That will have to be coming from more of his wingers. But the idea, and Don talked about it and mentioned it more than once, is power play. They are not happy with the power play this year. They're concerned about the power play, obviously, and what they thought Lindholm could bring to the power play has not worked, so they needed to go to someone like this. And that's where Mittelstadt has a huge opportunity to really take advantage of that because, of course, he wasn't on the first power play unit in Colorado and never will be or never would be. So here, that's his real upside, is he gets to be have a chance to take on that first power play, drive it from a forward perspective, and really contribute in that respect. He's an offensive guy. He's not a 200-foot guy. He's an offensive guy, and I'm interested to see that little bit of a different mentality from the Bruins from the center position and recognizing that we might have to push a little bit more in that spot.
Yeah, this is his 7th full NHL season, or I guess he had some where he had some injuries, but like taking away the year that he only came in after college and played 6 games. Like he's been in the league for a while. So he does have experience, and I'm not sure how familiar people in Boston really are with Casey Mittelstadt.
Probably not too much.
Probably not really.
You remember him a little from Buffalo, but
when you look at some of the years that he's had recently, he had almost 60 points the season 2022-23 season with Buffalo, and a majority of that comes from assists. Like 78% comes that season is assists rather than goals. He's, which tells you a little bit about his game and him being a setup guy. But what I'm getting at is you have to fill in around him, because right now that second line is not going to be what it was against Tampa Bay with Koepke and Lettieri. Like, you need to fill in those holes next to him now.
Right. He's a playmaker, and he said that himself yesterday when he met with the media before the Tampa game, where he was kind of like asked to describe his style of play or whatever, and he said probably more of a passer than shooter. Knows he does have to shoot. But yeah, like that makes you think like, okay, if you're going to get the most out of him, you need finishers on his wings, or at least one good finisher. Now, in theory, like, okay, you can put him on the top line and David Pasternak's his finisher, but if you're really trying to maximize your lineup, like, you would love to have Mittelstadt as your second line center, driving that line, creating offense, and then having wings who can finish. So that's where, again, this team building of filling these clear holes that this roster has, yeah, like, you're not going to get the most out of Casey Mittelstadt if he doesn't have wings who can bury chances. So where are you finding them? Like, okay, if you had re-signed Brad Marchand, he might have been one of them. Well, you didn't. So now there's someone else you have to find that probably isn't on this roster right now. So,
well, yeah, you have to. And Razor, you read the list a little bit earlier of some of the wingers that were available, that are may be available as they're pending free agents.
Nikolai Ehlers.
There you go. Like, there's a shooter.
There's your left winger. There's your left wing guy. So there are guys that are going to be out there, but you're up again. And again, like, yeah, we can't. Again, I think what we do in evaluating Casey Mittelstadt for the next 15 games is not necessarily 5-on-5 with where the roster is constructed. It's power play, because this power play is essentially what it will be. And let's see if he can. Again, it's just it's what it is a realization by Don Sweeney is, okay, we have too many guys that think 200 foot. We need a guy who thinks one way. And that's a big change for them, but that's the way the league's gone. That kind of goes to that culture piece where you just kind of look at it a little bit differently, and that's, again, what Mittelstadt does. They haven't had a center think this way, so like this much offense, probably in I'm not going to say ever, but in a really long time. Because I still put Krejci. He was very underrated defensively, as offensive as he was.
Yeah. Maybe Mark Savard, although like he also paid attention on defense.
Yeah, he's the best comp though. He's a playmaking center like Mark Savard.
Yeah.
So go find Nathan Horton and
Which,
Milan Lucic.
By the way, we're not saying he's
no, we're not.
Get to Savard level.
Thank you.
Let's not expect 90 points.
That'll get
Yeah.
used somewhere tomorrow too. It's like, all right.
Okay,
Chop that out and put it on the internet.
All right, we got to catch our final break here, but still time to call, text in 617-779-7937. We'll be back with some final thoughts on the Bruins deadline and what we want to see the rest of this season, because there are still games to play. This isn't over yet. So we'll be right back to discuss. Welcome back to Sunday Skate, post-trade deadline edition. I'm Scott McLaughlin with Andrew Raycroft and Bridgette Proulx. Let's quickly go to David in the car here on the phone lines. What's up, David?
Hey, good morning, gentlemen. So, Bruins definitely, I know there's a lot of mixed feelings about the trades and what, Marchand getting traded. We all love Marchand. We're grateful for what he's done for the team. But, we got to understand as fans that they needed to do something. It is about time. After the disaster from a couple of years ago when they had an unbelievable season and they lost in the first round, that really did not set well at all. And I think, unfortunately, in my opinion, with Marchand, I know there's talk about, we didn't get much for him. But then again, he's 36 years old. He's pretty much done. We got to be realistic. And what I see is that if you hold on to a guy like that, you're hurting the team. It's like in business. People get to a point, they've been there so long, they get complacent. They get very comfortable. And they're not doing above and beyond to make it better for themselves and for other folks as well. And I know sometimes it's hard to admit to that, but we have to be realistic. And I really think this was a good move.
Okay, thanks, David. Look, I think the deadline overall was good. Of the 5 players they sold off the active roster, I liked 4 of the trades. The Marchand is the one that's tough to swallow, and I would disagree with the idea that he's done. He's not done. He's not in his prime by any means. He's not what he was in 2018, but he was, before his injury, he was on pace for 63 points. That's still a legit second line wing in the NHL on any team. When he gets into Florida's lineup, he's probably on the second line. He's not third or fourth liner there. It's not Team Canada. He's not done. Now, we could debate whether, again, if you wanted to go into the contract, do you give him 3 years? Yeah, you can debate if he'd be closer to done, 39. Is he going to hold up for that? But in the moment, he's still a darn good NHL player.
Yeah, as of right now, he's still playing very well, well enough, especially for, he's also super fit, right? He's also keeping himself in amazing shape. And, he does the right things in order to have the longevity that he wants in his career. And
he'd had 3 surgeries this summer on purpose to be able to have a new body for those 3 years to continue to play to his 40s as well. That was he probably only needed 1 of them to get through this season, but needed 3 of them to get through another few seasons. So that was calculated as well. But yeah, it's obviously he's still pretty effective.
Okay, so we touched on Mittelstadt last segment. I do want to touch on the other guys who we saw make Bruins debuts. Henry Jokiharju on defense. We know Jacob Lauko, so he played his first game back. We've seen him around here before. Fast, energetic, fourth liner. And Marat Husnudinov was the other one who made his debut, and he was playing on a line with Lauko and Elias Lindholm. Either of them stand out for you? Because to me, I was impressed by Jokiharju's game. I thought they put him on a pair with Zadorov, which was the same place Carlo had been playing. He had some good defensive plays to kill plays. He had 7 shot attempts, second on the team behind only Pasternak. So for a team that hasn't gotten much from its blue line offensively, especially with McAvoy and Lindholm out, it was good to see someone have a trigger back there and be ready and willing to shoot.
He's 25. That's the upside. He's not. He's different again than what they have on the right side, especially. He doesn't play like Charlie McAvoy. He could pair up well with Nikita Zadorov if you're looking for it. He's not, again, similar to the Carlo situation. And it's different, right? They're two separate things, but he's like Mittelstadt to Coyle. This is Jokiharju to Carlo. It's different. They're very different. So they're thinking in a different way. It'll be interesting. He's at a 3.1 cap hit. This is a 1-year deal. Is this an opportunity for him? Do they have a vision to extend him, or is this a tryout? We want him in the building. I'm curious of all of those things, but he's a National Hockey League defenseman, and Buffalo has missed on a lot of these guys. They've kind of ruined these guys, and you hope that Boston found something here. But his underlying numbers are pretty good. His numbers are good. He's not a top pair guy, but it could be a guy that fits into your lineup with the right pieces.
Yeah, and he said yesterday that he requested a trade out of Buffalo. He said, I thought I was going to get dealt. I wanted to get dealt. He was asked, did you request one? He said yes. I think he felt like his play, his development, his career had just kind of stagnated there, where he wasn't.
Yeah, they have all those other first overall defensemen. Yeah. Not even just first round. They have first overall defensemen ahead of him. So not a lot to work there. And then, so it's just an interesting little piece, a little deal at the deadline. And Fraser Minton's the big one. We should get to him before.
Yes, definitely.
So
that's along with the first round pick, the big piece that the Bruins get from Toronto in the Brendan Carlo trade. Now, look, it's not like Toronto they're like the Bruins, right? Like, they've traded a lot of pieces away, so it's not like it's the best farm system in the world, but he was widely rated as one of their two best prospects, along with Easton Cowan. Center, has played some wing. He has played 19 NHL games, so it's not like this is a guy who's 3-4 years away. Like, this is a guy who's been knocking on the door. So, yeah, Razor, like, what do you know about him?
Well, and then just the other thing that happens is Toronto Maple Leaf prospects always have a little bit more value or perceived value than all the other teams because of the spotlight that these guys get, especially Canadian guys, especially major junior guys like Easton Cowan and like Fraser Minton, the two top Leaf prospects that they thought they developed in a big way. Again, Canadian, World Junior guys. These guys have been in the spotlight. This guy's been in the spotlight a long time. You mentioned his 19 games. He's big. He's strong. He's a Western League kid. So he's more of the power forward type, similar to a Charlie Coyle in body type. Similar.
That was the comparison Don Sweeney made too. It's like he brings some of those kind of attributes.
Correct. So
but he's 10. No, he's more than 10 years younger.
Oh no, he's a young. He's Matty Patra's age. Him and Matty were World Juniors together. So he was and is highly sought after. And I'm really curious how they deploy him the rest of this season. But we will be talking about this kid cracking the NHL lineup next year all summer. And he's something to get excited for all the people that love prospects and draft picks.
Yeah, maybe we'll get a chance to talk about someone besides Fabian Lysell and Georgi Merkulov, which is like every week. So.
Yeah, and so Fraser Minton is expected to start off in Providence. He was actually there when he got traded, but because of visa issues, he wasn't able to play this weekend. But yeah, I think the plan is to start him there. And you look at the numbers, and like they don't blow you away. So, 4 points in his 19 NHL games. Again, that's just like getting the kid a taste. 13 points in 26 AHL games this season. Doesn't jump off the page, but Razor, you've probably talked to more people about him than I have, but people think there's more offensive upside there, that there's more untapped potential that hasn't quite been reflected in some of the numbers. So.
Yeah, and how it kind of translates. He has NHL type game. Because again, in the juniors, he didn't do it either. Like he's a point per game guy, which in major junior, the high end guys were,
almost
2 points a game, right? So he's a point per game guy in major junior, which again would have been a little bit higher than what Matty Patra Again, so he's you kind of compare him to Poitras, but bigger and stronger. Like you could do
more of an NHL buff.
You could do that kind of comparison too. So, but the fact that he's a half a point guy as a 20-year-old in the minors is pretty good. He's not he's only got 8 penalty minutes. Like he's not a bruiser. He's not Milan Lucic, but again, a real solid player that should translate to the NHL in a big way and be a guy that you can grow with. So.
All right, we will be back next Sunday, 9 a.m. Do it again. Thanks for listening.